Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107.1. Every Thursday afternoon about this time, we take the opportunity to talk to Right, as we like to call her, Right Wing Granny. And we're talking with her about her blog, and column, rightwinggranny.com. But today we're doing it, well, several ways. One, she's not on the phone. She's here in the studio. We also have her husband, Bob, who's standing by to, fill in the harass. Thank you very much. And we have also Doug Gould, who was here earlier to help us work on Coastal Carolina taxpayers' wake-up call. And great program, by the way. And I want to thank you, Doug, for your time and expertise. That was exceptional.
My pleasure.
Well, we talked about the whole issue of gaslighting. Maybe we'll get to that a little later on in the program. But right, I want to start with you right out of the gate. And I thought this was pretty interesting. I liked your meme. We're not going to pack the court, and then all of a sudden we're going to throw our opponents in jail. Well, that solves the problem. You don't need to pack the court. That is an interesting situation. I do have to make mention of this. I saw an article earlier today that unfortunately the Supreme Court is losing any respect from the general population at large, and that is not a good thing. And I have to say that is a result of the constant harangue that the justices experience just to be nominated, let alone to be appointed. So that's a good point.
Well, the problem happened when the justices actually started supporting the Constitution and not making laws. One of the problems I think that we have with the Supreme Court and with Congress has gotten very lazy about doing its job. Our legislation is coming in the form of regulation. It is not coming in the form of laws. So we don't get to vote on the people that are making those laws, and it undermines the whole checks and balances system that our founding fathers set up.
And additionally, the courts don't get to rule on regulations.
Exactly. They go to administrative courts. It's known as the fourth branch of government, or the headless branch of government, and that's all those bureaucrats.
Yes.
And they're dictating the laws. And part of that is they've made the whole process so complicated that the elected officials, many of them lawyers, interestingly enough, and many of them very engaged in making sure that they have a great portfolio.
But this is why term limits won't work.
Right, that's exactly.
Because the people we're voting for and the people that we're electing are not the people that are actually making the laws.
That's exactly right. We're talking with Right Wing Granny, and by the way, I want to remind you, go to her blog, rightwinggranny.com. Okay, Right, let's start with the real agenda on climate change.
Well, this goes back to a statement made by the United Nations climate official, Ottmar Edenhofer. And she said this out loud. One has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. This has almost nothing to do with the environmental policy anymore, with problems such as deforestation or the ozone hole. So what's it about? We redistribute de facto the world's wealth by climate policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And by the way, that is not a new concept. This has been discussed in the past in other areas as well. It all comes down to this effort to, if you will, reduce the world to the lowest common denominator.
What happens is when they talk about equity rather than equality, and the problem is people have different talents and different abilities and different work ethics, and some people work harder than others, and they need to be rewarded for that.
There's an interesting, and we'll move on, but another aspect of this is one that's really been bothering me too, by the way, related to the president. He's all about the middle class, as if that's what all of us want to aspire to. We just want to be middle class. That's exactly.
And his policies are destroying the middle class.
Well, his policies are destroying it, but the other aspect of it is, why don't we set the aspirations
A
to
little higher.
just a little bit. All right, another item here from you. We've got rightwinggranny.com. You've got a story here from the Conservative Treehouse that noted here the list.
I love the Conservative Treehouse because they have no qualms about going behind the scenes as to what's happening. And they compiled a list of all the obstacles put in front of President Trump starting in September 2015 with the Russia hoax, the 2 impeachments that were also hoaxes, and all the things that are going on now. And when you look at the whole list, it's staggering. I didn't even do the whole list, but I also, at the end of the article, showed the difference between the way that James Wolfe was handled when he leaked information that was supposed to be classified versus the way that Donald Trump was handled when there were some real questions as to whether or not he had the authority to declassify things. And for some reason, James Wolfe didn't have a SWAT team show up at his house.
We don't need to get into those comparisons. All right, let's move on to another item. And I love this one. The government is messing with our food.
Yes.
Wow, this is scary.
State legislatures are allowing companies to inject beef cattle with mRNA vaccines to protect against disease. And there's a company, the good news
This is all experimental, I might want to add. And we're going to be consuming it. Well, I thought the FDA was supposed to assure us of the safety of our food products.
And every day we read more negative impacts from mRNA vaccines. But there is a company, I'm not doing a commercial here, but there is a company in Texas who says they're not doing it. They're just not going to do it. So keep an eye on your local farmers, and if you have to skip the grocery store and go to your local farmer, you might want to do it.
That does lend itself to the issue of the supporting your local farmers and local food networks, by the way. All right, wisdom.
Buy a quarter cow, right?
Right. Yes, you can.
I just did.
Oh, you did. That's Doug. That's Doug Gould who just said that. He just did buy a quarter cow. All right. Wisdom from someone who knows Washington?
Yes, this was an article that Dick Morris posted at his website, and the title was "It's Time to Play to Win by Their Rules." And he talks about the fact that if Jack Smith gets his way and puts Trump in jail and keeps Trump from running, we will lose the country. Now, I want to point out one thing about Jack Smith. Jack Smith was the one that prosecuted Bob McDonnell. That case was overthrown 9-0 by the Supreme Court. Jack Smith's record as a prosecutor is not a good record. He is a political hack.
Well, I will acknowledge that. The other thing that's really disturbing about this, though, is your comment a moment ago. This may just destroy the country. And it's, everybody has pointed out, 75 million voters supported President Trump. And even if there's a certain degree of erosion to 65 million, that's the number this Congress should be concerned with.
Yes.
I just want to make mention of this. Rightwinggranny.com is the website. I just want to remind you about that as well. All right, let's go to one here. You've got when common sense arrives. Well, we were just talking about the need for common sense, but
this is good news. The Louisiana legislature has overridden Governor John Bel Edwards' veto of the Stop Harming Our Kids Act that would prevent doctors from performing transgender procedures on children. And that includes surgery and drugs.
You think about that. Do no harm means also don't prescribe actions and medical procedures that have long-term consequences. I'm thinking here, wait a second. Do no harm, leave them alone, and you're doing no harm.
Let them be children.
Right.
And one of the best Facebook posts I ever saw was a guy who said, when I was 6, I wanted to be a pirate. thank God my parents didn't cut off my leg and blind me in one eye.
Didn't you always want to run a bread and breakfast? I'm interested in this one. And I will tell you, anybody who does that will tell you it's work.
Oh,
right?
it's a lot of work. Dealing with the public is always work. This was a Breitbart story. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey is now asking residents to take border crossers and illegal aliens into their homes. Now, there's no mention of being paid money for
Compensation?
this.
Any compensation?
No, and you're supposed to take a total stranger who's already broken the law by coming here illegally into your house. I don't think that's a good idea.
Will they do that in Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah, right.
I mean, why not? And by the way, President Obama should lead the way.
Well, I'm sure he could put up at least 25, 30 people.
Easily. I mean, it's a great idea. Rightwinggranny.com, rightwinggranny.com. Mary, before we wrap it up, let's talk about the folks that we've got sitting here because you're in the studio today.
Yes.
We've got your husband, Bob. Say hello.
Hello.
And we have your guest, and I want to mention this. We'll do this as a sort of a preliminary. Coming up this weekend with Wake Up Call, we have your guest here as well, Doug Gould. And Mary, explain to folks why Doug is here and why they should be listening to Wake Up Call this weekend.
Doug is a cybersecurity guy who's done a lot of investigation into the 2020 election. And he is able to put things at a level that even the computer and math challenged can
I think you said
understand.
at the kindergarten level for
Yeah.
you and me? Yeah.
Yeah. And I really appreciate, I really appreciate that ability because there's been so much information that has come out that has gone so far over my head that I have no idea what has actually happened.
And we mentioned this earlier, Bob, because you used a term,
Gaslighting.
I mean, it is. It's so complicated in some instances. And of course, I would argue that the opponents of any review of our election process want it to be as complex and complicated as possible.
Complex and misleading. Yes,
Oh,
they
well.
want us. Why are you looking for your car keys over there? Because the light's much better than where I lost them.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's silly. But
And Doug, I want to compliment you again. I thought this was a great program. I was given the opportunity to participate, but I think it's a great program. And as I said, we got to get you on the hustings. The problem we have is the lack of confidence that we have in our election system.
But
Mary?
part of the problem, too, to be very blunt, the election fraud scandal is not sexy. There's no femme fatale. There's no, it's just not sexy. And people, it doesn't grab you the way some of the headlines do. I mean, our news now has become, if it bleeds, it leads.
Right, it does.
This doesn't bleed.
well, this is sort of like the cocaine in the White House. Let's forget about it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and then one last thing. Let's talk about, you've got a regular program you do at CCTA, Coastal
Yes,
Carolina
we
Taxpayers.
talked about EMP,
What is that?
electromagnetic pulse, on Tuesday night. Next month, we're going to be talking with the majority whip in the House, talking about the legislative year in the North Carolina legislature.
All right, and that takes place at the Stanley Ballroom. What day?
Third Tuesday, 7 o'clock. So it'll be August.
We'll look at that. This is just the third Tuesday. in
Third
August.
Tuesday.
August 15th.
August 15th. That's why we keep Bob around. Mary Griswold with us, right as we call her, Right Wing Granny, to husband Bob, and to guest Doug Gould. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Viewpoints on the Talk Station.